Our program is having to do with how to equitably grow rooftop solar everywhere for everyone and add batteries. Cailey Underhill is the Advocacy and Development Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. And according to the Solar Rights Alliance website bio on her, she taught high school English for 6 years after obtaining a Master of Science degree in English education. And the pandemic served as a catalyst for her decision to engage more directly in protecting the environmental future her students deserve. In pursuit of that goal, Cailey was admitted into the Green Corps Fellowship Program, where she spent a year traveling across the country, learning how to become, learning how to become a field organizer. Her first campaign was with the Solar Rights Alliance, working to stop the solar tax. Cailey will talk to us about how incentivizing rooftop solar and batteries is an important component to reducing our fossil fuel dependence. And she will review the net energy metering, NEM, rules adopted by the California Public Utilities Commission in late 2022. So please welcome Cailey Underhill.
Hello, everyone. Give me just a moment to get that up here. Multiple computers. All right. Thank you, Ann. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and share directly. All right, perfect. Okay. All right, good here? All right, can everyone in the room hear me okay? Yes. Excellent. Can everyone in Zoom hear me okay? Thumbs up. I try. The effort's there. So as Ann said, my name is Cailey Underhill, and I am the Advocacy and Development Director with the Solar Rights Alliance. As she also said, I used to be a high school English teacher, and I taught through the pandemic in hybrid teaching. So this is very familiar to me, and I'm happy to pause at any point in time if there are any technical issues to make sure that everyone can hear and that everyone can see. So first things first, for anyone who is not familiar, the Solar Rights Alliance is the California nonprofit association of solar users. And our mission is to defend your right to make energy from the sun. That's what we do. So I'm here to chat with you about the state of rooftop solar in California today, as it has been quite the year. So the California Energy Commission says that we need 3 times more solar than we currently have to meet our state's clean energy goals, and 8 times more batteries. The foundation of the solar growth in California thus far has been this thing called net metering, sometimes known as NEM. It essentially lets solar users share their extra energy back to the grid for a bill credit. It's working. This graph I find very helpful. It shows where we are in terms of the overall growth versus where we need to be. So for my folks on Zoom, you can see here this yellow star. That's where we want to be, right there, for my folks in the room. And you can see that the current trajectory is close. It's not quite where we want to be, but it's close until recently. So before the California Public Utilities Commission decision that Ann was just referencing, we were headed in the right direction. We had 1.5 million solar rooftops. That is a huge gain in just the past 10 years. Just under half of all those solar roofs were going into middle and working class neighborhoods. So it used to be that you either had to be really rich or really technically savvy to have rooftop solar. That's not the case anymore. Households making under 50,000 and over 250,000 were going solar in similar numbers. And PPAs were allowing working class people to go solar without cash or a loan, so they could just pay for it as they go. And affordable housing solar was on the upswing. So folks who have typically been unable to get solar have now been able to. And I want to pause here, by the way, and say there's quite a bit of information to go through. So I'll go ahead and share the information. Please write down any questions you have, because we have a good chunk of time for question and answers at the end. So I want to make sure that I address it at that point for folks on Zoom as well. So the utilities wanted to kill rooftop solar with a triple whammy. They wanted to institute a solar tax of up to $700 per year. They wanted to cut solar credit by 80%, and they wanted to peel back protections for existing solar users. So even if you got solar 5 years ago, they wanted to hit you with these same changes. The Save California Solar campaign was one of the largest grassroots efforts in recent state history. 170,000 people wrote, called, marched, testified against this decision, and a remarkable coalition of over 600 nonprofits, cities, schools, businesses, elected officials got together, stood arm in arm to say, no, this will not stand. And it's important to note that equity leaders were on the front lines of this grassroots movement. So here's what happened. The Save California Solar campaign stopped the solar tax dead in its tracks. I want to take a moment here because that's a big deal. The solar tax would have been the knockout punch. Who's going to put solar panels on their roof when they know that the utility can claw behind the meter and get their pound of flash no matter what you do? Even if you have a battery, they're still going to tax you no matter what. So the fact that we stopped this, it's a big deal. We also protected the 1.5 million current solar users from any changes for the duration of their 20-year lock-in period. Another big deal. But the CPUC voted to slash solar credit by 75%. So I want to explain what that means, because I know I have a lot of folks in the room here who maybe have solar, are thinking of getting solar, folks who might be interested in that someday. So I want to explain the way the system used to work and the way that it's going to work under this new plan. So currently, under the first two versions of this net metering program, known as NEM 1 or NEM 2, when you make extra solar energy, it flows back to the grid. Those solar panels make more energy than a home uses. The utility sells that extra energy to your neighbors and gives you a bill credit that's roughly equal to whatever they sold it to your neighbor for. That bill credit then offsets the electricity you buy from the utility when the sun isn't shining. You can stay on that program for 20 years from the date your system turned on. Here's the way it works now. Folks who get solar will get 75 to 80% less energy for that extra energy that they send back to the grid. To put it in dollar amounts, right now, folks get about 30 cents per kilowatt hour for the energy they send back to the grid. Under this third version, NEM 3, they're gonna get 5 cents per kilowatt hour. I'm seeing the heads going like, yeah, that's a big cut. And it changes a lot about what this means for people. They're also going to be forced onto a rate plan with high evening electricity rates. And the lock-in period will only last for 9 years. So you're only even guaranteed this for 9 years. And the payback period will go from an average of 6 years to more than 10. That's a big shift for folks who want to go solar. So first things first, just a few things to know if you fall into any one of these categories. If you don't have rooftop solar and you want it, if your 20-year lock-in period is going to end soon, or if you want to add to your existing system greater than 1 kilowatt or 10% of whatever you currently have. So this next information is for you if you fall into any of those buckets. By April 14th, you need to submit a complete and correct interconnection application to your utility. That's what that means. So an interconnection application is a very normal part of installing a solar system. And the Public Utility Commission basically had to say, okay, if we start with a solar system as a gleam in someone's eye to those panels all the way on the roof, at what point are we going to say, yeah, they're far enough along that they get to be part of NEM 2? What's that point going to be? And they decided it was when the interconnection application is submitted. So this application has 5 things. First, a signed contract with a solar provider. Unless you're going to DIY it, then you skip that part. A single line diagram, a signed license board system disclosure document, a signed consumer protection guide, and something called an oversizing attestation, if the following applies to you. A lot of folks go solar and decide they also want an electric vehicle or a heat pump. And therefore, they're going to be using more energy that's going to draw from those solar panels than they were before. So they want to size their system bigger than their current load. Well, the CPUC decision says that you got to sign an attestation that says, I'm going to buy that thing, whatever it is it's going to cost you to have a need for more energy within the next year. So I'm going to install solar panels on my roof, and I'm going to also buy an EV within the next year. And therefore, you're going to let me, theoretically, put 150% maximum of your current load as measured in the past year. I've seen some like shaking head, like, what? And yet, this is another good example of the CPUC being out of touch with how life works for most of us. Most of us don't know whether or not we're going to buy solar panels and immediately go get an EV. We might, but most of the time, folks don't know that for sure. And they're going solar to try to reduce their bills to see if they can get an EV. So the oversizing attestation may well apply to you. Really importantly, construction does not have to begin by April 14th. In fact, the interconnection application is like a use it or lose it ticket for 3 years. You have 3 years to complete that construction. Yeah, so don't let any utility tell you that you have to get those panels on your roof by April 14th. That's just not true. It's not accurate, and it's right in the CPUC decisions. Like, we can point to the page where this thing exists. So just to be aware of that. So given these changes, given what the CPUC is planning to do, well then, what's the plan for the next year? What is it that the Solar Rights Alliance is going to work on doing? Well, a couple of things. First of all, we are certainly working to reverse or modify this NEM 3 decision where possible. I'm going to dive a little bit more into that in just a second. We're going to fight like hell to ensure that a solar tax never sees the light of day again. And believe you me, those utilities are gonna try. They're already looking at mechanisms to get this on the playing field again. We want to make solar and batteries cheaper by cutting the red tape and pushing for battery rebates. And I'll talk more about those in a second as well. And we also want to educate consumers about their options. This information that I told you, we've gotten hundreds of calls and hundreds of emails from individuals who don't know what I just communicated to you and are hearing misinformation from folks in the utility business who are presenting inaccurate information to consumers. So we've got some serious work to do there. So first things first is, what can we do to reverse or modify this NEM 3 decision? Well, there's basically 3 arenas in which the decision could be modified. The first is the legislature. It's possible that someone there could take action, but they haven't. Seems unlikely they will. And frankly, a lot of them wanted this to happen before the CPUC did it anyway. So we're not really looking at that as the best path for the moment. Option number 2 is a ballot measure. Solar Rights Alliance would be super excited about that if the funding were to present itself. So just for context, to get a real ballot measure going, to really run a good campaign around it, we've estimated it would cost about $5 million to get it on the ballot and $30 million to run a campaign against what you know is going to be a concerted utility effort, right? We're talking PG&E, SoCal Edison, SDG&E. We don't have to match them dollar for dollar, but we got to go toe to toe. We have reached out to our donors about this. So far, we don't have any early takers. So we're looking for a few folks in California who would be willing to be early takers, who could maybe give $1 million or $500,000 to start this initiative. This is California. Those folks exist. So if you or someone you know has the capacity for that kind of giving and would be interested in helping lead this charge, we would love to have a discreet conversation with them about what that would really look like, what it would really take to get this ballot measure off the ground. By the way, a ballot measure is how Nevada fixed a very similar problem. So we know it can work. And in that case, it was a little too late for the Nevada solar industry. So hoping that doesn't happen here in California. Now, the third thing, and this is what this slide is about. Oh, sorry.
They're just saying we're showing the bullet.
I know. Well, we're not showing bullets yet on purpose. We're good. Don't worry, but thank you.
Let them know.
Good eye, good eye. We're not showing bullets yet on purpose, but thank you. So, pointing to the camera for anyone who's wondering, like, what's over there? The camera. So, we're not showing bullets yet on purpose because this slide is about that third arena, which is the courts. So it is possible that this decision could be overturned in the courts. And the Solar Rights Alliance is not a legal organization, so we couldn't be the ones who started that. We are a grassroots organization. We can sure be the group that gives it some legs. So there are 3 groups that have filed an appeal with the CPUC: the Center for Biological Diversity, the Environmental Working Group, and the Protect Our Communities Foundation. And they filed an appeal that basically calls out 5 legal problems, legal errors in the CPUC decision. I just want to briefly tell you what those are. So first, the CPUC decision violates the law requiring sustainable growth of rooftop solar in California. That's what the law says we have to do, which makes sense, right? We have all these goals around clean energy that says we need a lot more solar than we currently do. So we should be making decisions that align with that. And this decision violates that law. And by the way, the CPUC decision acknowledges that it violates that part of the law. And instead, they erroneously claim that they can just put other necessary aspects before that component. That's a legal error. Number 2, the CPUC decision violates the law requiring them to put forward an alternative that increases solar adoptions in working class communities. They kicked that can down the road. They didn't do what they are legally obligated to do. Number 3, the CPUC decision violates the rules, their own rules, by failing to account for all of the benefits and costs of rooftop solar and batteries. So they basically way undercount the benefit that rooftop solar provides and way overexpand other ways that we get energy. Number 4, the decision makes it impossible to accurately measure its impact. They say right there in the decision that there are a number of key things that could impact whatever this decision will do, and that they're going to think about them later. So things like virtual net metering, which is a very potentially exciting way for residents who rent an apartment to be able to get access to solar energy when it's on a roof. They're like, we're just going to kick that decision down the road. A battery rebate for low-income users, we're going to kick that decision down the road. Well, then how do you know if this decision is going to do what you say it will? You can't measure whether or not this decision has actually followed the mandates of the CPUC if you've pushed so many decisions down the road that this no longer can really be measured against what you're supposed to do. And number 5, the decision violates the CPUC rules by slashing the solar program for churches, schools, and businesses without basis. The CPUC says in the decision, there's no basis for this, but we're gonna. And here we are. So these 3 organizations have filed this appeal. The CPUC has until the end of March to respond to this appeal. If they don't respond, these 3 organizations could take it to a court of law. If they take it to a court of law, a judge could pick that up, and the judge could decide in favor of the public and against the investor-owned utilities. You notice there's a lot of coulds and ifs in that sentence though, right? There's a lot of commas, as I would say to my students, and I think that's important for you to know. It's possible that this appeal could be a really big deal. It's possible that this appeal could really kind of come in clutch and stop this net metering 3 plan from happening. But there's a lot of ifs, there's a lot of coulds, there's a lot of maybes. And therefore, it's important for us to also be moving forward around some other areas related to this. So I want to talk about that as well. But the last thing here is that there is something that this body can do to help. The San Mateo County Democratic Central Committee passed a resolution to reverse the CPUC NEM 3 decision. And they were also joined by the Sonoma County Dems. So more groups are starting to pass these resolutions. I have a copy of it, which I'll be sure to share to you folks. It would be great if you folks wanted to pass the same resolution with the same wording. And if you wanted to send it for consideration to the California Dems Central Committee and send it to local legislators, Governor Newsom, and the CPUC as sort of an FYI, therefore amplifying the message. I'll make sure that all these slides are available should anyone want to send them out. These are the email addresses that would be used to send this to. And again, I have a copy of what the other Dem groups have done. This also has the potential to have an impact on this decision because Newsom ultimately did not step in to stop the California Public Utilities Commission from bending to the will of the utility rather than serving the public. Here's how some individuals can help. First of all, letters to the editor. are a very powerful mechanism to get information across, both to members of the public and to elected officials. It's important that we keep this story alive, that we relitigate it in the court of public opinion, that over and over and over again we point out why this is not okay, why it harms the very groups that the CPUC is supposed to be protecting. It would also be very helpful if folks could help get the words out to consumers so that they know what's happening and how these changes will affect them. Solar Rights Alliance has some resources for this. We have an FAQ document to help people understand the changes. It's right on our website. And again, this is a clickable link. So when these slides, if you do send these out to folks, you can click on these links in a PDF and they are live. They'll take you to these resources. And then we also produced a webinar on these changes that walked through not just what you need to know, but also how this came to be, how did this happen? So if you're interested in a little bit more of that information, that link is for you. And there's also another initiative that we're working on right now. As I mentioned, while the CPUC decision is very much still front and center for a lot of what we do, it's also possible that this thing is gonna go through as it is written. And that means we also need to focus on incremental gains that we can make in a couple of key areas. One of those gains is a battery rebate. And we're going to be holding a battery webinar in about a month. And anyone here who's interested in batteries, I very much invite you to come to that webinar. We're going to have experts there who can talk about everything battery related. We're also going to open a portal on our website for folks to submit questions. So if you're sitting here going, I wonder if my question would be answered, submit it, and we'll try to make sure that it does get answered in that webinar. So that's batteries. The other piece that I want to talk to you about today is a campaign that we are currently running to make it faster and easier, and also cheaper, for folks to go solar by streamlining the permitting process. So right now, it's twice as expensive to go solar in California as it is in many other developed countries because local permitting requirements drive up the cost of going solar here. It's sort of bound up in what we call soft costs. It's much higher here than it is in other developed places. If we can just streamline that permitting, cut that red tape, it would make it substantially cheaper and easier for you and your neighbors to install solar panels and batteries. Most cities have to make the switch anyway. So the federal government actually looked at this problem and said, wow, this is an issue. It's a bottleneck that occurs across many states, not just California. And the state of California looked at this situation and said, it's particularly bad here because a lot of people want solar. We are the sunshine state. This is where you go to get solar energy. So it makes sense. We would maybe have a bigger problem related to this than other states do. So they passed the Solar Access Act, SB 379. And it says, all right, cities, you need to create automated, online, instantaneous, streamlined permitting for rooftop solar and batteries. And the federal government provided one tool to do that. It's a software system called Solar App Plus. It is not an application like the thing on your phone. I was not part of the naming committee. It is a really robust federal software that's totally free for cities to use and does exactly what the law requires. In fact, it's the only software system named in the law. So the law says you either have to use Solar App Plus or you can enhance your current system to rise to the capability of Solar App Plus. Pick one. Most cities have to comply by September 30th of 2023. That's coming up faster than we think. All your elected official has to do to comply with the law is to choose to use Solar App Plus or an equivalent system to comply. One of the best pieces of news around this is that the state of California decided that this should not be an unfunded mandate, and they created a massive grant opportunity for cities. Cities can apply using a 4-page checklist. I bet a lot of folks in here have completed grants before. When I was a teacher, I certainly have pages and pages of writing. This is a 4-page checklist. It takes about 10 minutes for a city to send this in. The maximum grant amount is $100,000. The deadline is May 1st. So we need some help. California is a big state. I can be lots of places, but I can't be everywhere. But you can talk to your cities. So we need everyone everywhere to talk to their city council about this grant and about this law. We have found that the biggest obstacle here is that most cities just don't know that there was a new law that was passed. It just became law in January, so it's relatively recent. And most cities have no idea that there's this grant opportunity, a ton of money sitting on the table, and they will miss out if they do not apply. The grant is first come, first served. Right now, all of the cities that are applying, and counties too, are being awarded the maximum grant opportunity. That will not be the case the closer we get to the deadline. So it would behoove every city to go ahead and apply as quickly as they can. And then they have more time to use those funds to comply with the law. And again, they can use the funds to pay for the work hours necessary to just install that free federal system or to enhance their current system. Either one is fine. We just want to make sure that all cities and counties know about both paths. So this could have a really profound impact. When San Jose streamlined their permitting, they saw a 6-fold increase in solar. Yeah, and I always think, never mind 6-fold, what if there's just twice as much, right? There's twice as much solar in each of these cities. What a place California would look like. Palos Verdes is not currently in compliance with the law, and they have not applied for the grant. Please help, if you feel like it. What we found has been really effective in a number of cities is for folks to just go talk during the public comment period of their regular city council meeting and say, hey, we think you might not have heard about this law. We think it's possible you might not have heard about this grant. Will you apply? We gotta do it anyway, so we may as well. This law, by the way, applies to all cities that have a population higher than 5,000, so most places. I have developed a toolkit to help people do this. It's a 2-page document. The first page just outlines basically what I've said to you here. The second page provides 2 sets of advocacy steps. The first is for cities or counties that have already done the thing, and the second is for cities and counties that have not yet complied. Every resource you could need is right there in the toolkit, including a link to set up a meeting with me if you just want to have more information about your city, about your county, so that way we can try to make this happen. And we found that people have been really successful. It tends to be a really popular thing to ask city councils to do. So that's something you can do to really have a profound impact, and that local governments can do to impact this situation, even though the CPUC has made this terrible decision. So it's a great opportunity. Lastly, just a few other things to be aware of in the world of solar energy. So the Solar Rights Alliance focuses on rooftop solar users. That's what we do. But of course, there's more solar than that out there in the world. So I thought you might like to have just a little bit of information about some other solar things that are, going on. So that way, if you had some questions, you at least had a starting point. So first of all, has anyone here heard of a virtual power plant? Couple hands, okay. Couple hands, yeah. So this is an idea that is just starting to take off. And I think you're gonna start to hear about it more and more. So we just thought it would be helpful to just give you a little information. So the concept of a virtual power plant is that it's lots of solar and battery systems stitched together for the benefit of the community. That's the concept. So you're sort of making your own power plant. They don't exist though, unless you have a whole lot of solar and a whole lot of batteries. You need both of those things to make a virtual power plant possible, to get it to that scale. And that only happens with good policies that help to, again, reduce the cost of solar and also batteries for everyday people. Also, it's worth noting that not all virtual power plants are alike, and the details really matter. So if you are considering joining a virtual power plant, if that's something that's on the table for you, read that contract really carefully. And if you don't feel like you have a good strong concept of what's in that contract, send it to us. Send it to the Solar Rights Alliance. I'll put my email right up here at the end. Send it along, and we'll help make sure you know what it says, so you can decide whether or not it's something you'd like to join. But I think it's going to be something you're going to start to see and hear a lot more about. There are also a few other forms of solar that I thought folks might want to know about, things like community solar and microgrids. So community solar is typically an off-site array where people buy or lease a portion of the array, and then you get that bill credit. So it's a lot like net metering, it's just that the panels aren't actually on your roof. This is a good option for folks who maybe can't put solar on their roof because of their roof age or material where it's located or whatever the obstacle happens to be, or maybe they can't afford to get their own solar installed on their roof. Community solar can be a good solution. A microgrid is a little bit different. So it is an interconnected power system that can be locally controlled and can function either while connected to the grid or off grid. So it's still connected, but can be taken off grid. A microgrid, at least according to the US Energy Department, can be basically any size. So it can be a single home that can function on grid or off grid. It can be a neighborhood. It could be a university campus, a hospital, a city. So all those things are possible. This is an idea that I think is really just starting to take off. And so I suspect you'll hear more about this as time moves forward. And lastly, in addition to roofs that already exist, right? We've already built the homes, they're already there, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to put panels on the things that are already there before we go talking about putting panels out in the desert where there are sensitive ecosystems. We're probably gonna need to do a little bit of that too. Well, let's get everything on roofs first, right? There's also a built out area of our state that could be great too. And those are things like parking lots and highways. So there's a bill I thought you all might want to be aware of, SB 49, Senator Becker. It would provide a sales tax exemption for solar canopies over parking lots. It would also direct the Transportation Department, so Caltrans, to make a strategic plan that essentially makes right-of-ways available for leasing for, developing renewable energy supplies as well as distribution. So this might be something to keep an eye on. This is not a bill that Solar Rights Alliance is taking point on. Environment America is. So if you're interested in this, I really suggest you take a look at the resources that Environment America provides and Environment California provides. They're looking at several different nationwide campaigns that are related to solar on big box stores and solar in parking lots and highways. So they're the resource for that, and I just wanted to make sure that you had that information too. So I hope this has been helpful. This is my contact information, and I'm happy to leave this up here so that folks have it. I would encourage folks to email me if you have a particular question about your home and whether or not you want to get solar on it. If you're interested in getting involved in the streamlined permitting campaign, I want to make sure you have all the tools necessary to do that too. If you have a question about your particular city or a city where your parent lives or your kid lives, where maybe they could talk to their city council, shoot me an email and I can give you information about where each city in the state of California stands, counties too. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
I have a question.
Okay, hang on one second.
Wait a minute. We have a couple questions on Zoom,
Okay.
so we'll go back and forth. So we'll take one from the room first, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Okay, so just in case folks on Zoom didn't hear that, we have a couple questions in the room and a couple questions on Zoom. So we'll take questions back and forth. So the room and then Zoom and the room and then Zoom.
So let me know what we're going to do.
Yep.
Okay, so for those who are on Zoom, they never hear you guys. So if you're going to ask a question, you got to talk in the mic. Okay? All right. So who did you choose?
I heard a voice over here. Go for it.
Some of the power companies say that if you put solar on your roof, you can't put batteries and you can't store the power because you have to sell it back to the city and then buy the city's power back through the meter at night. And so I want to find out, is there any real rule that says if you can't have your own batteries, store your own power?
Thank you for that question. Want to make sure with a thumbs up for my Zoom people that you heard that question. Do we have some thumbs up, Reggie? Just want to make sure we heard the question in Zoom world.
Sort of.
What was that, Steve?
I'm going to assume we're good unless told otherwise. Okay. Oh, fabulous. All right. So first of all, thank you for that question. It's a good one. I would say that is sort of a twisting of the accuracy of the statement. So anybody can get a battery if you can afford it. You can put it in your garage, in your home, wherever, and get it hooked up to your panels. Now, this is an oversimplification of how this works, but bear with me. Here's the general concept. Sunlight hits your solar panels. Your solar panels produce energy that powers your home in real time, generally producing more than whatever your home needs. If you have a battery, it's sending that energy into that battery. The extra energy is going into the battery. It's not going back to the grid. It's going into the battery. When the sun isn't shining, because it's raining, as it is, or, because it's at night, the battery discharges first. If you got a lot of batteries, you might be able to just do it all from the battery. If you don't, then that little extra bit, yeah, I see Dempsey's like, I've seen this happen. If you don't have enough battery to cover your whole usage, then you draw from the grid, and then you're going to get charged for that little extra bit that you draw from the grid, more or less, depending on how big your solar system is, how big your battery is, and whatever your usage is over time. So I think what the information you're getting sort of skips that middle step, which is what is the function of the battery, which is to try to cover some of that usage. Now, it is possible to go off grid. That's how people do it. They get enough batteries that they just say, come pick up my meter. And then all they're doing is using their solar and using their battery. That means there's no backup though. Like if you're off the grid, you're off the grid, and you can't just draw from it because you wish you could. So if you're gonna do that, you gotta really know what you're doing, but you can, and that's how the batteries work. So does that answer your question? Great, fabulous, thank you for asking. All right, I'm gonna take a question from Zoom. I'm gonna try.
All right, so our first person is Kent Morris, and do you wanna unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, how you doing? Yeah, I really enjoyed your talk. Could you, I'm sure you've gone all over this before, but could you again very succinctly speak about the advantages of installing one's own solar panels as opposed to being a member of receiving renewable energy from Southern California Edison's Green Rate Program, or being a member of the Orange County Power Authority?
Great question. Thank you for your kind words also. So I think there's a couple different components to this question. So I'm going to try to pick them each one at a time. And if I don't answer your question fully, let me know and we'll take another pass at it. So there's a bunch of different ways to get energy in California. And by the way, I think it's worth just noting here, those changes that I'm talking about, the 30 cents to 5 cent drop, that 75% cut, that refers to the investor-owned utilities. So we're talking SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and PG&E. If you don't live in a territory that is controlled by those utilities, it's quite possible that there might be no changes to what your utility is doing. It's also possible that municipal utilities and community choice aggregators might just follow along with what the CPUC has done. I would call them and ask. So that's one thing to be aware of. Is that you don't get to control those rates, and you don't get to have control over exactly where that energy comes from or where it goes to. So the advantage of having solar on your own roof is that it's yours. Those are your panels, it's your energy from your home. And you can get enough panels to cover your energy usage. Maybe you get a battery so that then maybe you're not drawing from the grid at all or very, very little. So I think the largest benefit for most folks is a bill savings. That if they have their own solar, their bill is lower, typically, than folks who are connected to a utility, any utility, regardless of where that energy is being drawn from. If you don't have access to the kind of situation that Ken is talking about, a choice aggregator or a municipal utility who is drawing from clean energy sources, then a big benefit is that you are producing clean energy. And you're doing it on a piece of property that already exists in the world, and therefore not building anything that is, additionally impacting the environment or the ecology around you. So I think, Ken, those are the two big benefits that I would cite: bill savings and low impact on the environment. Of course, everyone is going to be in a different situation, right? Everyone is in their own unique individual situation. So we always encourage you to choose what's best for you. If you like paying into those programs and you feel that your bill is something that is hunky-dory and good for you, cool, keep doing that. But if you would like to have some control over your own energy, if you would like to know that the rates are going to be yours, that the panels are yours, either because you lease it or you have a power purchase agreement, then that's a good option too. So more solar is the key. Let's just have more solar, rather rinse, repeat. More questions? One from the room?
Yeah, you can come up.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Adrian Tatum, longtime club member, recently rejoined. I'd like to commend you for your wonderful explanation of solar.
Thank you.
And it turns out that I work for SunPro Energy, We are an energy company. We install clean energy systems, solar panels, batteries, EV chargers, and we'll let you know about the incentives, 30% federal tax credit, and you get to depreciate the equipment over several years. If anyone is interested, but we do commercial as well. And another thing is something called a purchase power agreement. That's not something we do, but that's something that we're trying to get with regard to condominiums and so forth. But I have my business cards. Come and talk to me. I will, or email me, and we can get something going. And this is very exciting. I've just started this, and I believe in this for a long time. So thank you. I'll be here, and you can talk to me in the back.
And then I'll just give a little context there. Thank you. So thank you so much for that information. It's great. And of course, there are lots of different organizations and groups to choose from. The Solar Rights Alliance does not endorse any one particular group or installer. That would be quite the rabbit hole, right, for us to go down. We'd have to check all of them. That wouldn't be so good. But we do have a series of resources on our website to help you choose the installer that's right for you. And so if you would like some tips for that, you can check out that page anytime. Great information about the types of things that are available in your area. So it's great to know that these resources are available. And if you'd like some additional information, you can check out our website, and I can share that in the resources I give to Anne as well. Shall we do another Zoom question?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay, so next up is Steve Goldsmith.
Yeah, hi, terrific presentation, and thank you for the important work you're doing. I wanted to talk about the politics of it a little bit. It seems like it seems like the shadows of the fossil fuel industry is behind all this, but the argument that they use is that that this helps poor people, that, the poor people the rich people are getting, which you touch on, but rich people are getting solar and the poor people are not. So there's I admit it, I own an apartment building in Los Angeles with 4 units. Okay, and the problem for me is each of my tenants pay their own electric bill. And then we have a little bit of electricity on the outside. If it could be under rent control ordinance, you can't you can't move that cost, I don't think. So in terms of policy initiative by you guys, in terms of putting forward the alternative program, is that if they made it very easy for each of the thousands of apartment buildings in Los Angeles to, not that the owner has to take the initiative, but the Department of Water and Power has to come to them and say, Mr. Goldsmith, here's all the electric bills of from you and your 4 tenants, and it comes to this amount, so we're going to put this amount of solar panel, and we're going to hire one of the companies to do it. And then, because they didn't come around in 1910 and ask people if they wanted to be their sewer hooked up and give up throwing, or to hook up the electricity in the beginning. They didn't ask people, they just came down the street and did it.
You're getting good laughs in here, just so you know. That was good. Good analogy. So thank you for that question, Stephen. I really appreciate that. And I think there are 2 parts to what you're saying, and I'm going to tackle the second part first, which is renters. So just so that everyone knows, the type of program, Stephen, that I think you're describing does exist, but it's one of these decisions that the CPUC kicks the can down the road on, and that's VNEM. So that stands for virtual net metering. And again, this is an oversimplification, but basically this is how it works. An apartment owner like you, Stephen, would put solar arrays on the top of the building and then take a look at the energy usage of each unit. Let's say you got one dude who's going out every Friday night, gone every weekend, uses like this much energy, and then you have a family of 5 who's running 4 TVs or whatever, and they're using a lot more electricity. You can virtually dole out energy to each of those units in differing amounts through virtual net metering. It's something we find people don't know a whole lot about, in part, Stephen, because of exactly what you just said. There's nothing that requires an apartment owner to get on involved with this and have to do this. The first step is to protect what already exists, and it might be on the chopping block. We don't know for sure yet. The CPUC has VNM up for a vote in the next, I want to say month, and that's something we're looking at very carefully. So step one is like, let's make sure we protect what we have. And then step two, Stephen, I think there's a number of different mechanisms by which we can help people know more about this and at least be able to help owners like yourself take advantage of it and take those first steps. So that's the kind of chunk of information number one. Chunk of information number two is essentially the how did this happen question. California is a green state. Newsom is a governor who has said over and over and over again that clean energy is a good thing. How did this happen? So here's the short version. If you'd like the longer version, please check out that webinar. We'll go into in depth. All the resources are there, everything you need. But I think it's important to be able to answer this question for you here. So here's how it works. The utilities, again, focusing on the investor-owned utilities. The investor-owned utilities make money when they build stuff. They have a guaranteed rate of return, 8 to 12% on everything they build. So power lines, power structures, that's how they make their dollars. Not on upkeeping those, as we've seen with many a fire, right? But on building them. So their incentive is to build and build and build as much as they can. And of course, if you put rooftop solar on your home, there's nothing for them to build. So there's no way for them to make dollars off of you, which by the way is why they keep trying to go for that solar tax. Because if they can reach behind that meter, then they get to take their pound of flesh from you too. This is also why their math tends to way overcount the value of long-distance solar transmission from arrays way out in the desert, because those are transmission lines they get to build. Now, okay, so yes, I'm seeing the heads nodding. We're there, we got that far. So then what happened? Well, as you all know, Newsom was up for a recall. One of the biggest factors in him surviving that recall was the involvement of IBEW, the labor union. That labor union is tied at the hip to PG&E. It is in their contract. They have a non-competition clause that they have to fight against any competition to PG&E. Well, what is that competition? Rooftop solar. So IBEW is like, all right, Newsom, we made sure you stayed in office. Don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. And here we are. So, and again, this is not me just saying this. We have no bone to pick with the union. The union is just doing what their contract has in it. This is no bone to pick with unions in general. I have worked with unions before as a teacher. I was one of the leaders of the teachers union in New York, which is one of the largest unions in the country. It's no bone to pick with the union, but it explains how it happened, right? Why Newsom didn't take a stance and say, nope, this has to be deeply different from what it is. We have to have a plan that allows for the sustainable growth of rooftop solar, that helps out folks in working in middle-class communities, that pencils out for those folks. And by the way, there are lots of things they could have done. And group after group after group told them what those options were. And they went instead with a near carbon copy of the joint utilities proposal. And when the State of California Solar Campaign stopped them from the solar tax and protected those existing solar users, that was all in the original plan. So this second decision, this decision in December, that was, we already had carved those things out. So basically, we didn't win, but we didn't lose. And we lived to fight another day. And the light at the end of that tunnel is batteries. Because if you have a battery, it doesn't matter as much how much credit you get from the utility, right? You're not sending the energy back to the grid. You're using it for your own home, for your own needs. So if we can make batteries a real possibility for folks, that's the direction we can head in. And if we can make it easier for people to go through the permit process, we can cut the cost. And if we can make it faster for the utilities to interconnect the system on the back end, then we can also make it faster and easier for people to go solar that way. So that's really where that three-part plan comes in. If we can't appeal or modify the CPUC NEM 3 decision, what we can do is make it faster and easier for people to go solar with those incremental gains so that we can get to the day where, as the title of this says, anyone who wants it, can have solar on their roof and a battery in their home, lather, rinse, repeat. All right, I think now we're in-person question.
I'm David Hall. Would you explain again the difference between net metering 1 and net metering 2?
Great question. So the difference between net metering 1 and net metering 2 is pretty slim. You only have net metering 1 if you got it, let's see. Most of the folks who have net metering 1 are their credit is about to expire. That plan is about to expire. And I think the two main differences, if I'm remembering correctly, though I have a resource that I will share with Anne so that you can also share it with you, is that it used to be that your credits could roll over. So at the end of the year, if you had extra credit from that solar energy that you produced, you could roll it over into the next year. Now you don't have that option. And the second big difference is that the NEM 1 customers, at least at first, were not on something called a time of use plan, which basically means when, and you probably have seen this on your utility bills, the cost of the energy goes up at high use times. So we're talking like 4 to 9 p.m. is the most expensive time to be drawing from the grid. The NEM 1 customers weren't on that plan. They weren't subject to that peaky rate where it goes up and down. Those are really the two main differences between NEM 1 and NEM 2. NEM 2 is hugely different from NEM 3 for the reasons I outlined. Again, primarily that the credit you're getting back from the utility for your extra energy is 30 cents per kilowatt hour as opposed to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. All right, a Zoom question?
Okay, so Walter, you can unmute.
Hi. This was a real, public service. It was a terrific presentation, and I really thank the Democratic Club for sponsoring this. It's terrific. So I have a personal consumer question and then a policy comment. So the question is, I had someone come to the door from Sunrun, which is a rooftop solar company, and talking to me about putting rooftop solar, and the company will own it if I want. I don't have to put any capital into it. So then I had to go through this process. I'm not through with it yet, but there's like a 20-page contract I have to sign with Sunrun. And I'm aware, as the salesperson made me aware, that the time is really important here, because we go past the deadline, then we won't get any two. So, I mean, what do you know about? Do you have any personal reconnaissance on, or professional reconnaissance on this contract that Sunrun gave me? It's impossible to read. It's 18, 20 pages long. You have to be a lawyer.
So Walter, please send it to us, and we're happy to take a look at it with you and make sure that it makes sense for you.
Well, but there's no time, because they're telling me that I really have to get in the queue, or this is not going to clear the April date, the deadline date.
Well, so I think those are two separate things. So the first thing I'll say is send it along, and I'll read it as fast as I can. Like, it comes to me, the inbox sends to me. So I'm happy to read it and see if I can help you understand what's in it as quickly as possible. Now, in terms of dates and deadlines, I want to make sure that folks are clear about what the deadlines are versus what any solar company might say they need to do. So this part's key, ready? The CPUC has said that the complete interconnection application needs to be submitted by April 14th. It's not whether or not the utility approves the application. It's whether or not it's submitted. The CPUC decision is also very clear that the application must be free of major deficiencies. That means there can't be any blanks or big mistakes. And the utilities have not clarified what a major deficiency is. And we don't think they're going to be very generous as the deadline gets closer, because frankly, they're slammed. They're trying to get through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these that are coming up fast because the deadline is coming up fast. Now, the same thing is happening to solar installers. So we are having a number of people report to us that solar installers are saying, I got to get my interconnection application in by March 15th or March 19th or whatever the date happens to be, because the solar installer is telling me that they can't get it in past that point. That may be totally true for each individual solar installer. It's about their capacity. It's about how many interconnection applications are coming their way. I've been hearing about a number of different solar companies that had March 15th as like, if you don't get it into us, we can't get it into the utility. That makes sense to me. It's a lot for a solar company to have to cover.
Are you
This,
guys
though,
anticipating, are you guys anticipating any court action to delay that deadline?
That's already what we're trying, that's what the appeal is. So the appeal is attempting to delay the implementation of the decision until those 5 things I talked about have been rectified. Now, again, the ifs, ands, and buts of that are substantial, so we don't know whether or not that's gonna have that impact. So as a consumer, it's important for us to be able to give you the information and for you folks to make the decision that is right for you. So Walter, what I can say is, again, I cannot speak to any particular solar installer or any particular solar company. What I can say is that we generally recommend that people get 3 bids. So if you have a company that's telling you something that doesn't seem like what you want, ask some more and see what other companies might be able to do for you. I do think it's the case that solar installers are gonna get really slammed as that April 14th deadline gets closer and closer. And it probably is the case that they're gonna say, like, we can't do anymore. We're already sending in as many as we can. So Walter, I hope that helps. I know it's maybe not the answer you're hoping for, but it's the information that we have. So we got that April 14th deadline, and installers can certainly say that they can't get it in if they can't get it in. Some questions in here.
Yeah, but that's, and I had the policy comment. Policy comment is that, just to finish the other idea, is Sunrun a reasonable company so far as you know?
Again, I can't make any recommendations
Okay, I
about
won't
any
put you
solar
on.
companies.
I understand. Okay, here's the policy comment. I work for the South Bay Cities Council of Governments. Jackie Backrack is executive director, and in fact, Judy Mitchell, who's on this Zoom, was at one time our board chair. Hi, Judy. The question is, I'm really glad to have this legislation brought to my attention. Because we meet regularly with the community development directors, and if we have cities that are not aware of this, we have the mechanism to making them aware of it. So,
Yes.
so I'll be happy to do that, and I really appreciate that information, and we'll do it immediately because it's really substantial. But I did have a comment, which is that I keep hearing this from different sectors. The fiber network guys complain about the time to permit for that. The state has made a big issue, like the cities are the problems in getting more housing built. And I just want to point out that the narrative is that cities are so incompetent and so inefficient they can't get their work done on time. And the fact of the matter is, every city that we deal with are overwhelmed with state requirements.
Oh yeah.
That they're not somehow incompetent or lazy or something, is that there's too much to do. And so the answer would be not to bypass the permit process, but to fund these organizations more effectively so they can do this broad amount of work. But I'm tired of the narrative that says cities are incompetent because they can't get the permitting done. But I do appreciate that this bill automates the process, which is extremely important, and the state pays for it, which as well they should, because it is an unfunded mandate. So thank you, we'll take care of it, but I just want to make that point about city.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for taking action. That's awesome. And actually, I'm really glad you said that, because if there's any confusion around this point, this is a really important opportunity to clarify. That may well be the message of other organizations, but it is not the position of the Solar Rights Alliance. The building department folks are not the bad guys. This is not like the utility fight. As you said, Walter, the building department folks are typically doing the best they can. They have so much on their plates. Part of what SB 379 is about is making their lives easier. So the concept of Solar App Plus in particular, as one way that a city could address this, is that it totally removes the PV solar, so regular panel solar permitting, from the building department needing to process them. It's just a checklist. There's no human that goes out and like puts eyes on a house and says, yes, this looks fine. That happens at the inspection process. Nothing changes about the inspection. So if we can cut the red tape around the permitting part, we can free up gobs of time for the building department folks. And Walter, that is exactly what this is trying to do. So like, points for recognizing that that's the need from the building department end. The need from the consumer end is for it to be faster and cheaper to go solar. And this bill addresses that too. So it's a both and, it's a win-win for the consumer and a win for the building department. And I do have, Walter, if you're interested, the city of Simi Valley was one of the first adopters of Solar App Plus. And they explained that they had basically been bending over backwards to get their solar permitting to happen quickly. So when they installed Solar App Plus, nothing changed on the outside for, you know, the average person trying to get their solar system permitted. What did change was on the inside of the building department, where just lives became vastly easier. And he sent me that message and gave me permission to share it widely. So I'm happy to send that directly to you in case you would like to share that with those folks. And again, the reason we suggest that people speak to their city council is that your city council is beholden to you. We don't have any right to tell a building department what to do. That's not our job. What you absolutely have the right to do is go talk to your city council about a law they need to follow and grant funding available to do it. So Walter, to your second point, spot on. This grant funding will give exactly that to those building department folks. So they don't need to try to pull those funds from nowhere. It exists from the state. They can use it now. It's first come, first served. And every single city and county has been getting the maximum amount that applies. So thank you, because you are spot on. And thank you also for taking action. So Walter, I just want to check, does that clarify?
Thanks.
Great, okay, thanks so much. All right, another question from in here? We have time, right?
I was gonna respond to Walter's question.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I don't know if it's true in California for sure, but a relative of my wife, who was a chief scientist of NOAA, put solar arrays on his house without paying for them, so he was in a lease agreement. And there was flooding in Boulder, Colorado, and he lost his house, but he still owed the solar company all of the 20 years worth of income that they had. So that's a risk if that's true in California.
First of all, I'm from Boulder, Colorado, so thank you for that. That's where I was born, that's where I grew up. That was great. And yeah, Boulder has a significant amount of flooding, and my neighborhood actually recently burned down because of a firestorm that was resulting from utility transmission lines and high wind. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the exactly. So there are a bunch of different ways for folks to get solar on their homes right now. You can buy the panels outright, you can lease them from the solar company. Another option is a PPA, which is essentially, David, exactly what you're describing. So the basic concept here is that the solar company owns the panels. You pay the solar company, and you pay the flat rate. That's the idea. So the value add for you is supposed to be that it's predictable, that you know how much you're going to pay the solar company, no matter what happens with the weather and stuff over time. And then they're responsible for basically sorting out the rest of it with the utilities, though do be aware that there are a number of what's called non-bypassable charges, which come from the utilities and they're related to a bunch of different things that the CPUC says, yeah, everybody has to pay those. Like anyone who's connected to the grid has to pay those charges. There's not a lot of them, but they're there. So this is worth checking with a solar installer. Before you sign a PPA, read it. Make sure you really know what it is you're signing and what you're signing up for. Ask that question about whether or not the PPA would, if you lose your home, do you still have to pay it? That's a good question to ask solar installers, so I really appreciate that, thank you. These are such good questions, I just want to say. This is awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Cailey, for that amazing presentation. I knew it was going to be. I'm Dempsey Nelson, I'm a longtime member of this club, and I'm also a net energy meter customer number 33 with Southern California Edison. I've had solar on my roof since 1999. The reason I'm bringing this up is just to verify as a natural user, everything that's been said here and presented is true. It's possible you can be, for all intents and purposes, off the grid. Because it was over 20 years, I did recently, and I shouldn't be clear, my payback, because of the value of NEM1, was within 7 years. Coupled with the use of my electric vehicle, which some of you are members here long enough to know I came to this club when Tony Hale was the president and talked about my advocacy for electric vehicles. So the combination that was alluded to is what returns that investment, heat pumps, other things. Now I'm on NEM2 because my 20 years were up, and I did spend a considerable amount of money to increase that. I know I won't have the same kind of payback because it's not coming from them as much as it was before, but where I will succeed is with batteries now. For the most part, I'm not buying energy from the utility anymore. I don't have a question, but I think there is something that my solar guru of over 20 years, who's a Palos Verdes resident, could maybe even add in helping Walter's question. And so if I may, Bradley Bartz, who has really been my solar guru for 20 years, and you may have a question, you probably have some clarification.
Thank you, Cailey. It was a great presentation. I'm Brad, I'm a solar guy. Forget my company name if you know who I am, you know my company name. Just a few points on Edison. They sent out an email about a week ago saying March 24th is the new date. Okay. They, 2 weeks before that, they said usually
Hard to hear.
10 days to process.
I'll repeat, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
10 days to process an application.
Or Brad, come join me.
And don't hold the
This is
mic
the
so
microphone.
close to your mouth. Not so close.
If you want to stand right here, they'll be able to hear you.
Oh,
If you stand right there, yeah,
all right, great.
there you go.
I think everyone can hear me back there, maybe? Sorry for having my back to you, though. That's, Edison has their back to you. Edison has been, fairly aggressive and happy about net metering 3.0. Their first announcement in January said, you must be installed and completed by April 14th. 3 hours later, they sent out a note that said, we're just kidding. Literally.
Yeah.
No, I'm not making it up. Last week, they sent a note, or 2 weeks ago, sent a note that says our processing times are now 20 days, not 10, which is, oh, okay. And they wrote last week that if you're not in by March 24th, they will not guarantee processing by April 14th. So they made their new deadline. I think that's an important one to fight in what we're doing a lot. Could you just explain to the audience? I understand from Edison's emails that it's $8 a kilowatt still to be installing in it metering 3.0. Have you actually stopped that? So if you install, according to the Edison emails, 10 kilowatts, for example, they're going to nick you $80 a month. Every month for 20 years. There you go. Thank you.
Very much. Okay, so first things first, on the changing SoCal Edison deadlines. This is something that we've been hearing from all three utilities. There have been both individuals and sometimes written reports that say you have to get this stuff in by this date or it's not going to happen. So again, to clarify, the deadline is April 14th. It just is. This is coming directly from the California Public Utilities Commission. What I want to be clear about is actually the second piece of what you said, because I think it is a really important detail. It is the case that there are going to be so many of these applications coming in, maybe some utilities have even hit this point already, like PG&E, for example, did not staff up to meet this demand. I know. So what that means is, it is very possible that the utility might not be able to process the application before April 14th. Now, what does that mean for you? It means that if your interconnection application has major deficiencies, you're not going to get another shot. That, I think, is what they're saying in the second round. The first round is just like malarkey, but this round, I think you're right.
Yes, we've had every application rejected.
So this is good for people to know, right? To be aware of this. One thing I will say, and this relates to the earlier question about Sunrun, but I think also just in general about solar installers. One of the tips, two of the tips that we provide in that online resource that I would encourage you to explore if you're interested in this, is that there are a few additional certifications you can look for with a solar company to see if they have at least signed an ethics agreement and if they are part of a credentialing service that just gives another layer to what it is they do. Those resources are available on our website. You can take a look, go research for yourself to find the installer that you trust. This is a human business. Installer's argument, the utilities argument. And so it is possible that some mistakes get made and that a interconnection application is submitted with a major deficiency that gets kicked back and then doesn't get another shot, and you're in M3 even though you submitted it prior to April 14th. All that I can do is tell you that that is what the reality is. We want to hear about that. If that happens to you, we want to know, because then we can see what we can do. No promises, no guarantees. What we have is what the CPUC has told us the process has to be, which is that they are measuring it by the submission date and that it has to be free of major deficiencies. Again, the problem is that the utilities haven't said, this is the list of major deficiencies, and this is what we'll nick you for. We don't know. So we have to do the best we can do with what we have. It's imperfect, isn't it? It's a problem, isn't it? So if you haven't yet, you might want to pop onto the Solar Rights Alliance website, sign up as a member. It's free. You get all this information. Everything we have is there. You can set up a meeting with me if you want to meet individually and talk about your situation. But yeah, I'm really glad that you brought these things up because I think that's an important nuance for people to know. In 1 second, I think we have, is this a related question? I know we have more people on.
Do you have a template that we can fill out that is the application so that we don't have to go, or at least minimize the amount of, we have to have all the right information?
Good question. The answer is no. We are not solar installers. Solar Rights Alliance, again, is a nonprofit association of California solar users. So typically, the interconnection application is submitted by the installer to the utility. It's the installer you gotta work with. That's why we have resources for choosing the installer that's right for you, but they're the ones who have to submit it.
It's a graduate level test. Yeah.
Oh, okay, if you're a DIY person and you wanna do it on your own, again, we are not installers, so we do not. Okay, sorry, the question was, what if you are a DIY person and you're not gonna be working with a solar installer? First of all, let me just reshare this slide.
Do you have an application?
Hold on 1 second. Yep. Okay, I'm going backwards, hold please. Hold on to your hats. So, first things first, these are the things that go into an interconnection application. The Solar Rights Alliance is not a solar installer organization. We're not experts in how to submit this stuff. There is a group that is designed to help DIY folks, and they are called Solar United Neighbors. They are a group that we link to on this website. So again, if you're sitting here going, wow, I need to find a solar installer, check out our 6 tips for finding a solar installer that's right for you, which also has the link to Solar United Neighbors. I would contact them because they're going to have the resources to help people navigate this if you're doing it on your own. And we have had a number of people reach out to us and say, you know, I'm a retired electrical engineer, I know what I'm doing, I want to do this myself. And so if that's your boat, unless you're familiar with this process, I would reach out to Solar United Neighbors, get some assistance from them. What I can tell you is that these are the components. So skip the first one. Obviously, you're not going to sign a contract with a solar provider. The rest is what you guys submit. Okay? All right, questions from Zoom or already?
Can you scroll down to your email?
Okay, my email is in the chat, and I will also go to the last slide, so bear with me, ready, here we go. All right, I think, do we have more questions from people on Zoom in or no?
I just want to clarify, someone was asking, there was a question on chat, when will batteries be bidirectional? They are bidirectional, but you charge a battery and then the battery can then.
Oh, I think you might be asking for
I'm guessing you're asking for cars. So there are cars that are what's called bi-directional, which means that you have the battery in your car that can pull energy from your solar panels and can also send it back into your house. Again, if you're a person who's interested in battery stuff, come to our webinar because I think that's going to have the content that you are looking for. We don't have it yet. We're working on it, but I promise you will. I will send it to Anne so that she will know. The one thing that I will say is that using EVs as chargers is a little controversial right now. Some people think it's a great idea, some people think it's not a great idea. We will talk about the pros and cons on our webinar, and that is about as much information as I can currently provide. regarding EVs. Frankly, it's a newer concept, and we are still researching it to see what we think about it. So we'll keep you posted. All right, other questions, comments, concerns, conundrums?
We have one question on Zoom from Steve. Steve, you'll be the final question on Zoom.
Okay, as somebody who's on that journey to beat the deadline, I can say for anybody in the room, one, it's quite easy, particularly if you're working with an installer. Two, the return on investment is terrific. It's like tax-free 12 or 14%. So think about it that way, not how long it'll take to pay it off. And the other thing I would urge your organization, and you guys know better than me for sure, and lawyers and all, to perhaps file an injunction on the date, ask for a temporary restraining order on the date issue in particular, all by itself, because, and with the solar and panel companies as, friends of the court, I think you might have a good chance, particularly how screwed up SCE is doing it. You could get a sympathetic judge to put a halt on that date, at least for a few months.
Point well made. We are not lawyers. We can't file an injunction. If another organization wanted to, we could pile on. That's something we could get grassroots support for, because, judges are people. So if they knew that a bunch of people were interested in having this halted, that could have an impact. So here's my suggestion for everybody here. Write letters to the editor. Tell people exactly what you just said, that this should be delayed, that it should be fixed. I have a link to the appeal in these slides. I would encourage you to read our analysis of the appeal, or you can just go straight for the appeal. The CPUC decision itself is about 250 pages of a lot of challenging gobbledygook. But the appeal is clear. It's 50 pages, written for people to understand, written for a judge to really understand clearly. So if you're an in the weeds kind of person and you want to go diving in the weeds, check out that appeal. I think it's really worth looking at. And it already covers the base that you're describing, but I hear what you're saying about what if it was like just an injunction, just for the date. We can't do that, but if someone here knows an organization who can and would like to, let me know, because maybe we can do something to build support around it. So thank you, good suggestion. Other questions, or is that it? Amber, good? Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think everybody got a lot out of your presentation and with the questions. And I just wanted to end with one thought. We did talk about the virtual power plants. And so while Cailey and I were talking to prepare for this meeting, there was a number of articles that had come out about virtual power plants, and then I learned that there are these pilot programs. So PG&E has a pilot program, one with Tesla, and I didn't see where Edison has a pilot program, but maybe they do. The thing is that these pilot programs have been going on for a number of years, and in other words, where they have people who have battery backup with their solar and are giving it back, and they're being tested, is this the right way to go? So I would hope that the Solar Rights Alliance will provide us information on how these, or find out how these pilot programs are going, and whether whether the outcome benefits us as consumers or not. So it's just something that came up in our discussion, and not knowing that we did have these pilot programs. So we will have a summary of what Cailey talked about today. We will have a copy of her slides in our newsletter. And yes, and we will add an event for the webinar on our website when we find out the date. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to move that the board of the club consider the request for our group to endorse her
Resolution.
Oh, the resolution, is that what we're talking about? Okay, well, it's just
so happens that the chair of the county party's resolutions committee is sitting right there. And I'm sure he and I'm on that committee as well. I'm sure both of us were sitting here thinking, resolutions. Yeah, so thank you.
It came to the right group.
Clearly, thank you for the invitation, really appreciate it.
Okay,
But
so
you have also.
we have a motion on the floor just to adopt it.
No, that the board consider adopting it.
Okay, we'll consider
as
our
a
board
group,
meeting, we'll have a board meeting
as a
tomorrow.
club, yeah.
Okay, and then we'll bring it back next week.
But it'd be
Next
more
month.
important for it to get adopted in LA County.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, the board will vote on it tomorrow. How's that? Huh?
He said, let's get her done, is what he said.
Get her done?
Maybe you can also mention that if you want to get it, there's a solar fund.
That was a support statement.
I'm sorry, there's too many going on now. We have a motion from the floor to adopt this resolution that nobody's read yet.
No, it says for the board to consider it.
Oh, for the board to consider. Well, I don't think we need a motion for that, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'll put
You
it
say you're gonna do it?
I'll put it on the agenda. How's that? Thank you. Anybody have any announcements or anything? Otherwise, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.